How are you there? Inflation. That is the scourge that is affecting Zimbabwe right now. And that is a huge task that President Emerson Mnangagwa has to tackle. And this video today is going to be very technical and will need me to move slowly, because it needs a lot of brain power. It's not just a matter of saying the government is corrupt and then that's it. We really need to get deeper into this inflation problem that Zimbabwe has and hopefully find some solutions, or at least attempt to find some solutions on how the country can move forward. Let's start by praying. Father, in the name of Jesus, thank you for leading us to this conversation that you are having concerning inflation. Father, as a prophet, you sent me to tell the Zimbabwean government and especially those in ZANU-PF a few weeks ago that there is pain and suffering that is going to come to Harare. And I remember, Lord, when you showed me horses coming from heaven, and you said that is the punishment to the ZANU-PF regime. Little did I know that one of the horses represents inflation. We see now the manifestation of suffering in Harare coming through price hikes, runaway inflation. And I know, Lord, that it was because of your anger, because of the things that were happening in Harare, politically speaking. And so, Father, I just want to invite you, the Spirit, to minister to us as to what is happening, what we must do, what they must do, what the people must do, what the prophet of God can do, and what does it mean for Harare going forward. So let us go to Harare. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Let us go to Harare right now. So I feel, before I started this video, by the way, let me just put a disclaimer. There's a few points that I have concerning inflation, a lot of questions and very few answers. But the Lord led me to make this video. So it's probably going to be a prophetic video, because usually when I start a video, I already know what I'm going to say. And I start saying, so yeah, this time around, I don't really know what I'm going to say, but I know that the Holy Spirit led me to start this video. I believe He wants to say something. So, as I was saying in that prayer, inflation is one of the pains that I've been prophesying about on this channel. That when I was saying that God is saying there's a pain that is coming to ZANU-PF. So it's going to be Emerson Mnangagwa's problem to deal with the runaway inflation in Harare. Now, I want to analyze our inflation history. Not the whole history, but I just want to start somewhere to try to get an understanding of why we are where we are and what's the way forward. You remember we had hyperinflation in the 2006, 7, 8. And do you know what stopped it? It was the dollarization that brought inflation to a halt during the times of government of national unity. And even after that, as long as there was US dollar, there was no inflation. But prior to that, when we had Zim dollar, during the years when Gideon Gono was offering bearer checks, we had a sustained period of very high inflation, or actually hyperinflation, the highest hyperinflation in the whole world, even on a historical basis. So you can see clearly that dollarization. Please be patient. This video is going to be slow because I'm talking about a very technical subject. Dollarization stopped the hyperinflation. It's not like bringing market. So okay, of course it had some effect in the market because he was more trusted by the market, but rather dollarization itself. And I will try to explain what I think, why I think dollarization brought that. Here's the thing. Michael, not Michael, uh, Milton Friedman, one of the most respected US economists, says one thing about inflation. He says that the government causes inflation through its printing of currency. We know Robert Mugabe started the printing of currency, was it 1997 or 98, when he printed money to give by the 50,000 to the war veterans, unsustainable. And in subsequent years, we know that he got involved into a broader system of monetary expansion. He began to print more money, Robert Mugabe. That is why you will see that in the 1990 to 1997, 98, prices were fairly stable. I remember the rate of the Zim dollar to the South African rand was 1 is to 2 for a very long time, for many years. I remember if frozen it was 50 cents for a very long time. Okay, so we didn't have much inflation until the time when the war veterans asked for the 50,000, and Robert Mugabe started printing himself out of problems. That was when the international community stopped supporting Zimbabwe financially, and therefore he printed money. So Milton Friedman is proven right, because in Zimbabwe from 1980 to 1997, prior to excessive money printing, we didn't have much inflation. Inflation is always there anyway in any economy, but we had sustainable low inflationary environment. So when Robert Mugabe started printing money from 98, 99, 2000, all the way to 2008, there was excessive inflation because uh, of his printing, and also a lack of the counterbalance. Do you know what the counterbalance to printing money is? Is increased productivity. I think I've said it before in videos here that if ever you are going to print money, okay, you need to accompany that with increased productivity. However, when Robert Mugabe gave 50,000 to the war veterans and printing money to pay soldiers, teachers, and the policemen in order to keep him in power, something fundamentally happened on the other side of the equilibrium productivity. Remember, the white farmers were productive. So, taking a look at the level of money supply in the country and the level of productivity due to white farmers being productive, so there was an equilibrium in these two, money supply and productivity. They were both very almost, let's just use the word the same. Okay, it might not be true, but more or less true. So that productivity by white farmers counterbalanced the money supply in the country, meaning that our inflationary rate was stabilized. So when Robert Mugabe began to print money to pay the war veterans, and to print money because due to the farm invasions, the government was no longer getting financial support from international community. So it put a lot of strain on the fiscal of the government. So we had to run higher government deficit. And I know that the government's wage bill increased. So the proportion of the wages in the national budget became bigger. And you know that there isn't much productivity that comes from paying more to the soldiers and the police. Because Robert Mugabe did it as a security concern to keep himself in power. By the way, ZANU-PF has always followed policies of keeping themselves in power more than of running the economy properly. Even in the 1980s, they actually did not want a black indigenization because they feared that the black people who would be industrialists might become too powerful to take the government out. So, for example, already we come to a problem there. Problem number one: of ZANU-PF wanted to stay in power at all costs. I will come back to this point because I want to finish off my point of productivity, the relationship between productivity and money supply. I hope I will remember. Let me write it down. Okay, staying in power at all costs. Because it's important. I want to come back to this point, but I don't want to digress too much from the original point. So because of all of those factors, that Robert Mugabe to print to give war veterans money, and the government was not receiving money from the international community, so he had to print more money for that. And for the fact that he wanted to stay in power, he needed to print money to pay soldiers and policemen who are not productive. Okay, the only productivity that they gave is to keep Mugabe in power. So for the purposes of keeping him in power, the regime in power, it was successful because the regime got to be in power. But at what cost? Because there's nothing like a free lunch in economics. If you have got a gain here, there is a loss somewhere. So Robert Mugabe chose the gain to be to keep him in power, but there was massive social costs to that. He could have eased the social cost and limit his powers, but to him, total control of the country was more important than the social well-being of everybody else. So economically speaking, economics is a zero-sum game. Economically speaking, the gain, let's call it the economic gain of whatever resources we had, accumulated in keeping Robert Mugabe in power and impoverishing the whole nation. The other option would have been spreading out that economic gain to improving the citizens' lifestyles or their outcomes, at the same time reducing Robert Mugabe's stronghold on power. Since he was the one who was making the decision, he could have made the decision to lose power or made decision to have his power curtailed or reduced. But so because he was the decision maker, he decided therefore that economic gain must go towards power retention more than sustaining the whole economy. So we are seeing here now that because of this, money supply excessively increased, productivity, because the white farmers were no longer producing. Remember, I'm saying that these two must balance. So as the money supply increased to a high level, productivity is here. Productivity was supposed to go up as well to counterbalance the equation. So such that if productivity is also rises, the amount of cash chasing the amount of goods and services, they both would have risen, or on comparable basis, they would both be the same. So in that instance, you don't get inflation. However, in Zimbabwe, when Robert Mugabe started printing money, the productivity failed. First of all, because the white farmers were no longer there. The black farmers that took over, it would have been better if they just took over the farms and there still would have been some productivity. No, what happened is they did not produce, owing to the fact that they were not educated to run farms. They didn't have the mental capacity or the stamina to be in the business, in the agro business. They were in short-term gains mentality. True enough, the liberation war veterans went to war to fight for the land. Understand? But when it comes to economics and stuff like that, having the land isn't it all. that land has to be productive. So the war veterans took over the land, and all those land barons. They sold, they destroyed machinery, they sold the machinery that was there. They made money in the short term, which probably increased inflation in that time. But in the long run, it reduced drastically the productivity in the agricultural industry. You see, this thing has got a spillover effect when we have an agricultural industry that was sustaining the economy at that time being destroyed in that manner. It filters into other sectors of the economy, the banking industry. I'm sure the banking industry took a massive hit because of the white farmers that had to run away for dear life, so they couldn't pay back what they owed, and the other banks that made profit from the agricultural industry also failed. I mean, even downstream industries that benefited from the supply chain of agriculture, it totally disseminated the vibrancy of the Zimbabwean economy, aiding to the reduction of productivity, not just agricultural productivity going down, but also the productivity of other industries that were linked to the agricultural industry. Therefore, it means our productivity that was here is now going down, but our level of money supply is now going up. So now the amount of cash now chasing the few goods and services in the market, see the difference now is now big. Because of that, the value of these total goods and services expressed in terms of money supply becomes higher. That's where you get inflation from. Because all this money must chase all these goods. But now probably you remember, let's just say this is level one and level two. We're at two. Now we're going to one here, and then we're at four here. So it's $4 chasing 1 unit of productivity. Before it was $2 chasing 2 units. So the price of each unit is 1 unit is $1. Now we've got 4 units of cash chasing 1 unit of productivity, which means that this unit of productivity effectively is no longer worth 1 unit. It's now worth 4 units. I mean, this 1 unit is now worth $4 of total available cash in the market system. You see, I'm simplifying this thing for so that we can be easy to so that it can be easy to understand. So this is on a macro level. On a macro level, the total supply of cash we say now is $4, and the units have moved from 2 to 1. So this $4 must buy this 1 unit, which means this 1 unit is now $4. But before, when we had 2 units and $2, each unit was $1. So from $1 to $4, that is inflation. So that's what happened in Zimbabwe. This hyperinflation occurred because our productivity fell drastically because of the reasons I have outlined. At the same time, our money supply increased tremendously. So over time, as Gideon Gono was printing more cash, because there is a psychology in economics that we have to understand, that people don't understand that what we need in an economy is productivity, not money. All right. We do not need money primarily. We need productivity. We need products, goods and services is what we want. It's just that goods and services use a medium of exchange in order for you to get. So that medium of exchange is called money. Okay. But essentially, when you wake up in the morning, you want food. You don't want money. You want bread and eggs, not money. You understand? However, to get bread and eggs, you need a medium of exchange. That medium of exchange is called money. Okay. So the utility of money in or the purpose of money in this instance is for money to be the medium of exchange. Not that money being what we need. We don't eat money really. We use money to buy the food that we eat. What we need is food. Now, the psychology now of the people is like this. People begin to think that money is what we primarily need. So everybody begins to look for money instead of looking for productivity. If there's no food in the country, ladies and gentlemen, we don't go and look for money to get food. No, we go and produce food. You understand? You go and plant maize. You go and rear chicken so that we can have eggs, so that we can have meat. Productivity brings the goods and services that we need. We need industrial goods to be produced in Zimbabwe. We need educational services to be produced in Zimbabwe, financial services to be produced in Zimbabwe. So the government of Robert Mugabe was supposed to be to go after policies that improve goods and services production. When Chenjerai Hunzu took over the white farms, the government was supposed to institute ways and means in which those farmers were going to be productive. Because we don't want to be farmers for the sake of being called farmers. Go to in farm 21. We have got 21 farms. What we need is productivity in those farms. Now, Robert, because of the psychology of money, I told you that people forget that we do not need money, we need food and services. So, but in their psychology, they think they need money. And Robert Mugabe satisfies them by printing money and giving them money. So the money supply increase. Everyone has got money. My whole village has got money. But how about the productivity of the food, the goods and services? It goes down. There's nothing. There's no food. That's what happened in Zimbabwe. You get lost into thinking into this fallacy that we need money, and then you begin to print more money. With all that money available in the system, you forget that what is important is productivity. My minister went on my farms, but they're not farming, they're not producing anything. Food is limited in the country, so therefore you need to export food. You need to export other goods. Okay, I'm using food to speak, to use simple terms that people understand. But generally in economics, you need goods. Goods are more than food. The other goods are consumer durables and high-end items, and also services, all sorts of services, financial services, education services, government services, all sorts of services. Now, because Robert Mugabe and Gideon Gono got us into this place where they they were trying to please the mind of the people. Okay, it's propaganda or it's a lie or whatever. It's an illusion. The illusion of printing bearer checks with higher denominations makes people believe that they are getting money, they are being paid money, which is of value, but forgetting that they are in an environment where productivity has drastically fallen. Do you understand? So even if Gideon Gono had to print those checks and Robert Mugabe was to put the printing machine 24/7, it means absolutely nothing how much money, because money is not what we are looking for. I told you that money is a medium of exchange for the goods and services that we need. So you don't need money, you need goods and services. Money comes in as a lubricator in the system. But because of weak human psychology and the illusion of money, human beings chase money. And Robert Mugabe, who wanted to keep himself in power, gave human beings what human beings want: money. But actually, when they had the money, they discovered that there is no goods to buy the money to buy. So that large supply of money, it caused inflation. And because of that as well, now we get to this other phenomenon whereby you will need to export goods and services from outside economies. because your own economy cannot produce enough goods and services anymore, because we destroyed the farming industry, that destroyed the rest of the industry, because Robert Mugabe wanted to maintain power more than anything else. Now, the phenomenon of wanting to buy goods in other economies, goods that are denominated in foreign currencies. So for you to have access to those goods that are denominated in foreign currency, you need to go to the currency markets to sell your own currency and buy foreign currency. Because in your own economy, there is inflation, high inflation already, because of loss of money supply, as Milton Friedman explains. Loss of money supply, at the same time productivity has gone down. So in your economy, there is high inflation, and also there is not much goods produced. So to supplement for the demand of goods, you will need to export from foreign lands. But the thing is that that is in another foreign currency. So now the inflation, the inflation in your country, the inflation in your country causes people to be attracted to foreign goods, because in a foreign land, the prices are fairly stable. So people begin to want to buy from foreign countries. Now, now another phenomenon happens. The more you use your currency to buy of other people's currencies, you are increasing the demand of the other people's currencies, meaning that the price of other people's currencies goes higher vis-a-vis your own currency, meaning that your currency is losing value as through this mechanism. So this trade imbalance would cause your currency to devalue, so that seemingly cheaper foreign goods would, to a local guy who gets paid in local currency, as the Zim dollar is being devalued, according to the local guy, the prices become the same because of a devaluation of the Zim dollar. But because the government kept on printing more money, there was a lot of buying power erosion of the local currency, such that it was not even easy to afford even foreign goods. To understand? So we saw that during the government of national unity, that thing was arrested. What was arrested really by dollarization? Do you know what was arrested? There's only one thing that was arrested by dollarization. It was immediate stop of the money printing machine. Because hyperinflation in Zimbabwe was caused by money printing. Just as Milton Friedman had said in the 70s and 80s, that it is the government that causes inflation, not not the wholesale, not the consumers or whatever. So, because the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe does not print US dollars, and by the way, the Federal Reserve of the United States that prints US dollars has got a mandate, one of its dual mandate. They've got a dual mandate of keeping employment low and also keeping inflation at around about 2%. So by that time, the Federal Reserve was doing its job well. The inflation rate of America in the 2000s was above 2%, but not excessive, perhaps 2, 3, 4% thereabout. All right. So their target of 2% is always like it's always well managed. All right. Now, when we fired our own reserve bank to be the issuer of currency and hired the American Reserve Bank to be the issuer of currency via the use of the US dollar in Zimbabwe, that is when prices stabilized. So prices only stabilized because the government stopped printing money. And now it was no longer the Zimbabwean government not printing money. It was the Federal Reserve Bank not printing money. That is in the 2000s. Okay, I'm not talking about now. In the 2000s. So that dollarization stabilized the country. It's which proves Milton Friedman to be right that governments causes inflation through printing. So after the government of national unity, I think we carried on with us US dollar, right? I think we did with Robert Mugabe coming. Yeah, we did carry on for some time. Then John Manguja came. I remember telling my friends the day John Manguja introduced those coins. There was coins that he introduced. He said that it is for the sake of change. Remember those days in the economy. I was in Zimbabwe during those years. I remember I went back to Zimbabwe to stay in Zimbabwe for like for 2 or 3 years. He introduced 25, 10 cents, 25 cents, 50 cents. He said it's for change. I told my friends, brah, I follow economic news. This guy doesn't want to tell you. Central bankers do not tell you that truth. John Mankoja is bringing back a Zim dollar. People are like, no, he said he's not bringing back the Zim dollar. He's doing it for change. He says, guys, I follow central bankers closely. I know their messaging. This is the Zimbabwean government bringing back the Zim dollar, but they needed to do it cleverly. You know what? I used to have a blog many years back. I think during that I can't. I think the name of my blog was, I forgot the name of the blog that I had on blogspot.com. I remember writing an article during that time about it that this is the same dollar that is coming. But anyway, my blog nobody knows about it. I think it 4 or 5 views. So why was the government bringing back the Zim dollar if the US dollar was doing fine? Because the US dollar was doing fine. We used to have the problem of coins, but it was a minor problem that you didn't have to fix by introducing Zimbabwean coins. You could have just gone to the United States itself and asked for United States coins. All right, we had United States notes. Just go to the United States, take their quotas, whatever they call them. They hear them. I've never seen one. I always hear them talking about quotas and 50 cents or whatever. Take those American coins and bring them to Zimbabwe. But the Reserve Bank said, no, we're going to have these coins, the Zimbabwean coins, that are 1:1 with the US dollar. For me, for that very moment, I saw a problem. I saw that those coins were Zim dollar because those coins were not issued by the Federal Reserve Bank in Washington, but they were issued from Harare. And that 1:1 rate was actually decreed upon us by John Makuja. If a central bank governor decree a rate, that is just his own mindset. The market has got its own mind. I knew exactly from that day on that the market will not value this because of the reasons of lack of prudential financial systems in our Zimbabwean central bank. There is no way that the market will rate the Zim dollar coins 1:1. Well, the fallacy lasted for a short while because actually lies have got short legs. And anyway, Manguja went on to have $1, $2. Then they say that it was backed by some, I think was it $200 million facility from, was it the African Bank or some foreign bank? Was it Africa Development Bank? Yeah, I think it was Africa Development Bank that they said gave them 200 million US dollars to back these new currency. Now, here's the thing. The thing is about economics, a lot of people don't study economics, and they just don't want to understand things. What Mankuja meant by having 200 million dollar US dollar facility to back the coins, the notes that the same dollar that he was printing, because he printed $2, $5 notes, and then he says it's backed. Now, first of all, I mean I didn't believe it. Okay, I knew what he was doing. I'm gonna go later on. I will explain how the ZANU-PF regime steals the wealth of all Zimbabweans through currency devaluation, currency manipulation. To them, it's a way of looting. It's another systematic way of looting the public wealth. The wealth, let me not say public wealth because it will appear I'm talking about government money. No, the money of the people in the public. Your money that is at the bank, your money under the under the mattress loses its buying power because the government prints more money. So if the government wants to tax you without you knowing, okay, they want to take your wealth without you knowing, they reduce the purchasing power through inflation, through printing money. But the dollarization was preventing the ZANU-PF regime from stealing the wealth of the people in the country. So as long as we're using the United States dollar, which is governed by the board of governors in the Reserve Bank in the Federal Reserve Bank in Washington, the Zimbabwean uh, policy makers and the handlers of our government were not able to siphon public wealth through the banking system because they were no longer controlling the banking system. So Babalamba, they were hungry. So they needed another way of stealing the Zimbabweans' wealth. The way of stealing Zimbabwean wealth is controlling the currency. So they had to find a way of controlling the currency again by coming up with a silly excuse of saying we're doing or bringing these 25 cents 50 cents coins for the sake of change. Okay, and then they bring the $1 $2 $5, and then they lie and say, oh, it is backed by a $200 million facility that we got from the African Development Bank. Essentially what they're doing now, they are grabbing money, the powers of monetary policy back, not for the purposes of running a prudential economy, but for the purposes of printing more money, which has got an effect of a hidden tax. That hidden taxation doesn't go to the government coffers, but it goes to their own pockets. That is the biggest scam that these guys are running through the Reserve Bank. To understand? So when John Mangoja was talking about the 200 million facility that was supposed to back up the new Zimbabwean currency, he was trying to calm the market because if that was true, there was no need for the Zimbabwean dollar to be devalued because there would be $200 million worth of Zimbabwean currency, and somewhere there is $200 million US dollars that is that is backing it up, meaning to pay the bearer on demand. Which means that if we no longer want that Zimbabwean dollar, you take to the bank, they will give you the US dollars because that's what backing up means. So if that was the case, if John Mangoja was not lying, if that was the case, then there was not going to be a devaluation of the Zim dollar, even if the market were to not trust him. Here's the thing. Even if the market do not trust Mr. John Mangoja and they will revalue the dollar to 1:2, for example, the market not trusted. As long as there is that $200 million facility that bakes the money out in the streets, it actually essentially means that the market will merely be underpricing an otherwise valuable asset. But because John Magucha was lying, all right, so he printed more than $200 million worth of Zimbabwean currency. So he even went, just to say, from 200, he went to 400. By going to 400, it means essentially that the value of the Zimbabwean currency vis-a-vis the US dollar has lost its value by 50% because 400 million Zimbabwean dollars backed by 200 million US dollars. You can see the other one is 2 times more, which means it means you need 2 times the US dollar to get that 400 million. Actually, essentially, it means that the Zimbabwean dollar will be worth 50 cents to the US dollar. So he kept on printing more money. 200 million US dollar, now backing 1 million, 1 billion US dollar. 200 million US dollar, now backing 2 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion. That increase in money supply, okay, Money supply that is backed by just a facility of 200 million causes that currency, that Zim dollar currency, to keep on losing its value in real terms, and thereby like destroying that lie that Manguja said that this money is backed. That money was not backed. I knew very well from the word call that there was no money backed. It's just a story to sell to the public. So what happened now is that Zimbabwean dollar moved from 1:1. I, I think now is 1:4,000. That is a huge crime. That is a criminal offense because these guys know exactly what this means. This means that during that time, if you had 4,000 US dollars, you changed it to Zim dollars, they were going to give you 4,000 Zim dollars. And you put them under the mattress. Today, if you take those 4,000 Zim dollars, you change them back to US dollars, you get $1. So your 4,000 US dollars 10 years ago is now $1. What happened to the 3,999? Well, it's in the bank's account of Idim Nangagwa, John Mangoja, and their cronies. That money is in Dubai in their bank accounts. It's real money because in economic terms, it's a zero sum game. Wealth is not created, wealth is transferred. So what happens is that your $4,000, which is now $1,000, that 3,999 was wealth transferred from you to somebody who is clever, who is running the Zimbabwean government and the monetary system. So we have got a government that runs the monetary system for the purposes of transferring wealth from all the Zimbabweans to a few using this hidden system of a hidden taxation through currency devaluation and inflation. So this is the crime of the Reserve Bank. This is a crime of Edin Mnangagwa and Mangochi. So when they they got rid of the MTC and they started doing this thing, and another part of that plan they had to remove Robert Mugabe because Robert Mugabe, as I say, his problem. See, the problem of Robert Mugabe was that the way he managed the economy was for the purposes of power retention more than trying to understand what are the needs of the broader society and what are what should we prioritize first. Understand? Robert Mugabe prioritized uh, power retention. For what purposes? You might ask the question, why did Robert Mugabe want power retention? I've been asking myself that question and I've come to this conclusion. Just to be called Ndini president. No, no, what advantage is there to being a president for life? Like what is it that you lose if you're no longer president? Okay, Barack Obama is no longer the president of America. What has he lost? Donald Trump might think, whom I believe should not be running for president, he is not the president of America, but what has he lost? George Bush is no longer the president of America, but what have they lost? Nothing. There is no need to be powerful. But Robert Mugabe just wanted power for the sake of power. You realize that having power is not necessary. What is necessary is being able to redistribute wealth and resources across society in the best way possible, prioritizing what needs to be prioritized for a sustainable growth of everyone else. So Robert Mugabe needed to know that his power retention strategy was no longer needed. He was no longer needed to be there anyway. But then it's a selfish mindset which taxes everybody else for the purposes of pleasing a humanistic desire to be regarded as powerful. It's not really important. But my point is that he made us pay a huge bill for keeping him in power. Not like there was something that he was going to do whilst in power that was so important. So let me put it this way. If a government is doing something that is special and they have got special abilities to deliver something that needed to be protected from people that were coming to destroy that government, power retention
it becomes essential because the government needs to retain power to do the important thing that it is doing. But what important thing was Robert Mugabe doing in power? Nothing. So his purposes for power retention was so that he can just be powerful. And the president, Chete, Chete, like there was nothing. Well, I've thought about it, I've analyzed, I looked it up and down to see what was the most important thing that was so essential to keep Robert Mugabe in power at all costs, such that if Morgan Tsvangirai had won the 2002 elections, the country would have lost something big that Robert Mugabe was doing. There was nothing that Robert Mugabe was doing for country that warranted ZANU-PF to keep him in power. All right. So we see that Robert Mugabe wanted to keep power for the sake of emotional benefit. Some people may say that it was the ZANU-PF wanted to keep power because of they were afraid of the crimes that they did. That is hogwash. Uh, Tsvangirai was not geared towards punishing Robert Mugabe for anything. In any case, the military, which in itself has got an overarching power over the political class, was made up of people that were involved in Kokuraundi, including General Chiwenga himself. He was in the military, so there was no way that President Tsvangirai was going to say Kokuraundi must go to jail when Chiwenga, who has got the gun over the politician, is himself one of them. So that was a lie. ZANU-PF did not stay in power because they were afraid of going to jail. ZANU-PF stayed in power because it is the emotion of a man, his ego. So the whole country suffered because of Robert Mugabe's ego, his ego of desiring to be president. Chete kuti are more important than you, ndini first gentleman, those useless things. Tony Blair was a prime minister of Britain. He is gone now. That what has he lost? Nothing. Gordon Brown, Theresa May, all these people, they're no longer prime ministers. But what have they lost? Nothing. So Robert Mugabe is just a stupid, emotional feeling, self-importance. This that drives a man into destroying a whole economy and a whole level just for the sake of I must be the one who is in Zim one in that limousine and people must shout my name and say Mr. President, Mr. President. That desire to be a god when you're just a human being. Do you understand? So Morgan Tsvangirai could have been the president in 2002. He could have instituted a reserve bank that practiced proper monetary management and would have closed the tap on excessive money printing and closed the tap of siphoning the wealth of everybody else with the pockets of the few. And this thing that he was a British what was Robert Mugabe in the 1980s? Was he not an ally of Britain? Okay, was he not an ally of Britain? Was it not when Tanzania Hunzo began to invade farms that Robert Mugabe effectively was a rogue member of the Commonwealth? And therefore, Morgan Tsvangirai would have just brought back what Robert Mugabe has been in the 1980s as well. So these fears of British recolonization through MDC were propaganda that was overplayed on ZBC to make people believe that there is a British invasion. It's nothing. There's nothing like that. Okay. For Robert Mugabe, for me, it appears it was personal for personal glory, but for the rest of the ZANU-PF regime, it was for the sake of carrying on siphoning the wealth of everybody else because these guys are not productive. You understand? Productivity, it requires labor, it requires input, it requires strategies, it requires proper management. However, stealing on the other hand or confiscating the wealth of others just requires you to have the power to do so. You've got the gun, if you've got the control of the military, you've got control of government and the reserve bank, you don't have to work. You can just have the people working for you. All you do is just put a gun on their forehead and they give you their wealth. How do they do that? Through this silent taxation of current of causing inflation through printing money and currency devaluation and the arbitrage that is practiced through taking money in the reserve bank and selling in the streets at a higher price. So you see now after the 2017 coup, that removed Robert Mugabe, one of the reasons why Robert Mugabe was removed is also because the mafia state that is lazy. Okay, these are lazy gentlemen in Harare. They are so lazy. They are not productive. They don't want to understand productivity and they don't want to understand how to run an economy. All they want is to siphon wealth. See, you can never have wealth unless you produce it. Okay. If you don't want to produce wealth, somebody else has to produce it for you, or you will have to force someone to produce it for you, or you will have to take it from the people that are producing, who are productive. So the mafia state of Zimbabwe is not interested in being productive. However, they're interested in those that are productive in the economy and transferring their wealth to themselves. They use that via the control of the Reserve Bank because the Reserve Bank is able to print excessive amount of money in the system so that they can cause this inflation. So a reserve bank guys, the guys that have got access to the reserve bank who are running our country, when they need goods and services in the nation, they do not have to work, no, so that they can do some barter exchange. By the way, barter exchange is still exchange of goods and services still exists. It's just that instead of barter, we've got something in the middle that is called money, currency. Now, if you have got control of the reserve bank, you are the one who issues that currency. Prudential principles tell you that you have to issue currency as 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 need as need arises. But if you are corrupt, you will use that uh, advantage that you have to print money for yourself instead of me producing something so that I can go to the market and exchange for other people's produce using money as the lubricator. If I'm actually the one in charge of the lubrication process, money printing process, RBZ, ZANU PF Mafia, I don't have to produce anything. Since I told you that people they've got this illusion that money is what they need instead of goods, I can just go to the reserve bank and just take printed money and give people, and people will give me goods and services. So that's what the ZANU-PF elite are doing. They don't have to produce anything. All they have to do is to get people who produce things, then they give them worthless Zimbabwean paper because they've got access to the worthless Zimbabwean paper which they print. As I told you, and the people who receive that worthless Zimbabwean paper, because they perceive that it has got value, they think it has got value, but it doesn't have value. What has got value is productivity. So on a macro level, there is this thing whereby something as valueless as printed Zimbabwean paper is printed and given to the ZANU-PF elite, who use it to give to the unsuspecting Zimbabweans who are actually productive, who are really productive. So you see, in the gold mafia, the guys who run the gold cartels, if you ever see them digging trenches, digging for gold, no, they don't dig for gold. Have you ever thought about that in the gold mafia? Which gold mafia digs for gold? They don't. Do you know what they are? They are buyers. They are buyers. The guys who do the productivity are the guys who digs for the gold. The guy who carries the heavy stones and works hard. Those are the people that are productive in the society, in the gold industry, or in the whole mining industry, whether it's agriculture, in whatever industry. Those that are doing the hard work are the sweaters. Now, the gold mafia comes with printed money. And remember, I told you that this printed money, what does the printed money come from? It comes from the machination of the central bank governors. They just print money, they give to the ZANU-PF mafia. The ZANU-PF mafia goes out there and give that worthless printed money to the Zimbabweans who have been working hard mining gold and These people are called buyers. There's a network of buyers. So the buyers take take the gold, which is the real thing, okay, which is the real produce gold, but the Zim dollar is not real produce. Even if you to say, well, it's not the same dollar they buy in foreign currency, they give the gold miners US dollars. It does not matter, because even the printed Zim dollars that the chefs have, they just go to the currency markets and exchange that for US dollars. What's the difference? Because if John Makuja can just print 1 million Zimbabwean dollars, okay, and give it to a mafia guy. So if the people who sell gold want US dollars, he just needs to take that worthless 1 million Zimbabwean dollars and go to the currency markets and buy US dollars, take those US dollars and go and buy gold. As far as the gold miner is concerned, he got US dollars. Okay. But as far as the gold mafia guy is concerned, he now has real gold, but he acquired that real gold by using first and foremost printed Zimbabwean dollar. So this excessive printing of the Zimbabwean dollar, then going to the currency market to buy a US dollar with printed Zimbabwean dollar, causes the Zimbabwean dollar to lose value, all right, to lose value, and they begin to they begin to take the goods and services that are produced by hardworking Zimbabweans. At the same time, when they've got all of this cash, instead of reinvesting it in the economy in other productive sectors, they don't do that, because of not doing that, they are reducing the productivity level of the country, because other people in Zimbabwe who would have used their money to invest, because they are productive people, they've been crowded out. So it's only the gold mafia that is involved in buying the product, the produce in the market. But when they make that money, they don't reinvest that money, because they don't want to be productive. As I told you, productivity needs you to have managerial skills, productive skills, and foresight, and all the other things that these mafia doesn't want to do. So this is a laziness, by the way. So the mafia state is a group of people that are lazy, that don't want to be productive. So because they are not productive, our productive level in Zimbabwe comes down, and because they essentially print money willy nilly to buy whatever is productive in the country, and they use that to buy gold, and other minerals, lithium and all those other minerals. So what am I saying? What am I accusing the mafia of? I'm saying that all the people that are producing stuff in the gold in the mining industry and selling it, they're essentially selling it to the Zimbabwean mafia. But then this mafia, the money that they use to buy is not money that they worked for. It's money that they print. Because it is money that they print, the money of the Zim dollar loses value. But they do not keep their wealth in Zim dollar. They have got access to the reserve bank, so they change their Zim dollar and buy US dollars. And those US dollars, they are able to bank offshore, and at the same time leaving the burden on the rest of the Zimbabweans. So the rest of the Zimbabweans are left with a burden of a spiraling inflationary market. What Zimbabweans are left with higher inflation rates and a currency that is always losing its value, meaning that the purchasing power of all the Zimbabweans is massively eroded all the time. So this is slavery. This is some sort of economic slavery that is brought to the market by the governing power or the governing system that doesn't care about its people, but uses that as a bargaining chip against people, or rather uses their access to the control of the economy as a way of enslaving the rest of society. So here you have it, folks, Zimbabweans. Your gold mafia are your lords, and all of you are the slaves. So, key takeaway, in the mining industry, the gold mafia does not buy gold using its own money. It uses printed money. That is why there's inflation in Zimbabwe and a currency devaluation. Because as Professor Milton Friedman said, inflation is caused by one place only and nowhere else. It is the government printing machine. And in Zimbabwe, the government printing machine prints a lot of money primarily to service one group of people, the gold buyers, the gold mafia. We call them gold mafia, but they use that money to buy all other minerals, including lithium, diamonds, or whatever. But they themselves are not involved in the productivity because they don't want to invest themselves in production. That is why they will have either local Zimbabweans mining the gold or foreigners who come and mine. Why do we have foreign companies coming to mine? Because the foreigners come with expertise to mine, which the gold mafia doesn't want to do. The gold mafia doesn't want to develop abilities of production, being engineers, and all of that hard work. They give it to the foreigners. So they pay money, they pay the foreigners in US dollars, okay, to get that gold or diamond, whatever it is. But the money that they use to pay those people is money that they printed. So because they are printing excessive amount of money, that inflation, that whoop, ultimately someone has to pay. The real pay comes through price inflation. So the price inflation that is reflected in the broader system is the Zimbabweans now paying the price for the gold mafia. So the gold mafia doesn't pay for the gold and the diamonds and the lithium that they buy from either a Zimbabwean producer or a foreign producer. They just get it printed by the Reserve Bank. And since economics is a zero sum game and there is no free lunch, someone has to pay for that. Because according to the gold mafia, they're essentially getting the minerals for free. Okay. They're getting them for free and banking money overseas for free to them. But since there's nothing like free lunch, the question is who is actually paying for that? It is the Zimbabweans who experience high inflation, an erosion of their value. So that is why Itim Nangagwa must go and the gold mafia must be stopped. It must be taken out of the Reserve Bank. As I told you, John Mangoja, the day I become president, he must make sure that he is out of the country because he will not carry on in that office. He will not carry on in that office. And Mthole Ncube, he also must know that he can no longer have access. Mthole Ncube, anything associated with even his cats and dogs should never be allowed any government premises because of this financial crime that these people are engaged in. This is a huge financial crime. You understand? This is stealing through smart ways. That's why I call these guys the Dandayet PhDs surrounding the president. Because in order for you to pull off this thing, you need to be a PhD guy. Even for me, and I explaining to you, I know most of you don't understand. In fact, I know most of you did not even listen to this video to this end. Because this stuff is just too difficult to understand. It's too educated to understand. It needs a PhD guy. Someone once said that the best way to steal a bank is to own one. And the best way to steal from a country is to run one and own one. ZANU-PF runs Zimbabwe. And this gold mafia, they own Zimbabwe. Because they own Zimbabwe now, they're able to steal from it from the inside using the institutions of Zimbabwe, primarily the Reserve Bank and the highest sitting in the office there in, what you call it, in Chancellor Street. The guy who runs government, Itim Nangagwa, and the guy who runs the financial sector, John Mangoja, and the guy who runs the coffers of the government, what's his name, Mthole Ncube. So those three positions have been used by the mafia state to own Zimbabwe. And as they own Zimbabwe, the mandate of these three guys, the mandate of the guy who is sitting in First Chancellor Street and in that building of the Reserve Bank and the finance minister, is to allocate resources in such a way that there is equality or some level of equality and justice in the economy. Now, that is a very hard thing to do. Lots of governments around the world are grappling and struggling with that. So my point is that when when Chenjerai Wonzi entered the farms, Robert Mugabe started printing money. You see how I differentiate Robert Mugabe and Idi Mnangagwa. Mugabe failed. All right. When Mugabe was printing money, he wasn't printing money for the purposes of getting that Zim dollar and exchanging to US dollar and buying gold and putting and siphoning money outside the country. No. Mugabe was grappling with a tough economic question, which was well, that would have been tough for anybody anyway. And therefore he attempted and he failed. Which is okay, which is understandable. Kana uchizama something and then you fail, it's understandable. You are trying, you failed. Idim Nangagwa is not trying and failing. No. Idim Nangagwa and the Gold Mafia, they know how to do things right and they know how to do things wrong. And then they deliberately choose to do the wrong thing because it is what they intended to do in the first place. The reason why they did the coup to remove Robert Mugabe is so that they can run the country to the abyss. So running the country to the abyss is at the core of your presidency. It is Mnangagwa's job, his role in the mafia, is to run the country down to the core through the extraction of the human capital or human wealth, this massive transfer of wealth from the rest of the people to themselves. So when you're talking about 2030 vision 2030, it's a vision of carrying on doing the same thing over and over again until I do not know when. They believe that it is not sustainable as far as I see it. At some point, there has to be a giving in. At some point, they must, you cannot milk your cow all the time. At some point, you must feed the cow. That's why I've said in another video that, you know what, called Mafia, you are Zimbabweans. Let's build a better Zimbabwe for all of us. Now, here's the thing. I just want to change your modus operandi. I can change you from being Zimbabweans. It's still your country. All right. Some of you will definitely gonna go to jail, not because I want to put you in jail, because we've committed financial crimes that affect everybody else around the world. So, in Zimbabwe, and it's not my decision to decide on your fate, but it's the decision of the Zimbabweans and the rest of the world. But as far as I'm concerned, as the leader of Zimbabwe, those that are there when I am there should be adhered to a new course of direction. To understand, we need to take a new direction whereby the seat of power in government and in the Reserve Bank uses, I mean, does its job properly to alleviate poverty. As I was telling you that the Reserve Bank of the United States has got a dual mandate of reducing unemployment and keeping inflation low. These two things, when you keep inflation low, you protect the purchasing power of the broader public. So that is a tremendous amount of power that the Reserve Bank governor has. And we need a guy who is trustworthy, not the guy who would betray the trust of the public. When you actually have policies that reduce unemployment, you are putting a buffer or protecting the country from economic mayhem. You are protecting the country from poverty by increasing employment. So we see that the EDA regime is interested in increasing unemployment, in increasing poverty in the country. And 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 these things they do it deliberately. And they do it so smart because these guys have got PhDs. They know how to meander through the things. So the PhD of John Mangoja, when he brought the Zimbabwean dollar back to the system, he lied and said he's doing it for change. I knew it that day that he's lying. There's nothing like doing it for change. He's bringing a Zimbabwean dollar because as long as they're using a US dollar, this siphoning of public wealth is impossible because it is done through access of the power of the Reserve Bank. Do you understand? So if the decision making of money supply is done by the Reserve Bank in the United States, then the Zimbabwean mafia cannot have access to that. So John Mangoja and his PhD cronies, the thunderheads surrounding the president, they are the ones who decided that they should lie to people and say, "I will put in coins." Well, so bangena kancane kancane, one start with coins and say it's for change. And then one start $2, $5, we say this $200 million facility, which is a lie. And then we're gonna start our own printing. And then as the currency loses its value, they will come up with all sorts of crazy excuses. But at the core of it all, my people, at the core of it all is the massive transfer of wealth from everyone else to the few who are part of what we now term gold mafia. But essentially, it's a small group or a narrow group of politically connected criminal or criminals surrounding the president. That is why we need to remove the criminals surrounding the president in order to set Zimbabwe free. My name is Ngobani Zondo, and I am running for president of the Republic of Zimbabwe, but not via these shameful elections, because these very same criminals, PhD dunderheads surrounding the president, have captured the judiciary and also our election system and our opposition political parties, so that they can ensure that their system of massive wealth transfer can continue unabated. And there's no way that ZANU-PF can reform itself out of power. And electioneering is a waste of time. We need to remove those fools and remove them now, whichever way we deem necessary, as the law-abiding and patriotic citizens of Zimbabwe. Have a great day.